The events leading up to the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor were the culmination of decades of rising tensions, complex geopolitical maneuvering, and imperialism sweeping through Asia and the Pacific. By the early 1930s, Japan had embarked on an aggressive path of military expansion in East Asia. This expansion was driven by the desire to secure vital resources such as oil, rubber, and iron ore, as well as to assert Japan's dominance over neighboring territories. Japanese imperialism was motivated by its vision of a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, aiming to bring much of East Asia, Southeast Asia, and the Pacific under Japanese control. Japanese military leaders believed that Japan's survival and prosperity were intrinsically tied to its ability to control vast territories rich in natural resources. Their desire for expansion was not just about territorial conquest, but about building a self-sustaining empire that could rival the great powers of the world. This imperialist vision led Japan to clash with the interests of the United States, who had its own territorial holdings and economic interests in the Pacific. Japan's imperial actions would put it on a direct collision course with the U.S., culminating in the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Japan's conquest of Manchuria in 1931 marked the beginning of its aggressive military ventures, followed by a full-scale invasion of China in 1937. These campaigns resulted in widespread atrocities, including the infamous Nanjing Massacre, where Japanese forces brutally killed hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians. As Japan expanded its territory, the United States took notice, realizing that Japan's aggressive actions posed a threat to its strategic interests in the Pacific, including access to raw materials and maintaining regional stability. In response, the U.S. under President Franklin D. Roosevelt began taking steps to contain Japan's aggression, imposing trade restrictions and embargoes, particularly targeting Japan's critical oil supplies. The tension between the U.S. and Japan escalated further as Japan occupied French Indochina in 1940. In retaliation, the United States imposed severe sanctions, including restrictions on oil exports, which directly threatened Japan's ability to maintain its military operations. Japan saw these actions as a direct affront to its imperial goals, making military conflict increasingly inevitable. This geopolitical maneuvering, combined with Japan's unyielding ambitions, made the possibility of war with the U.S. more likely as both countries sought to assert their dominance in the Pacific. By 1941, Japan's leaders recognized the inevitability of military confrontation with the United States. The Japanese government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Hideki Tojo and other military elites, made it clear that Japan's expansion in the Pacific would not stop. Japan had already conquered much of China, and the goal now was to establish a defensive perimeter stretching from the Japanese home islands to the shores of Southeast Asia. To do this, Japan realized they needed to eliminate the U.S. Pacific Fleet, which was seen as the most formidable threat to their imperial ambitions. Japan's military leaders, including Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, understood that to carry out their territorial expansion effectively, they first needed to neutralize the U.S. Navy's ability to interfere with their plans. They believed that by striking a devastating blow to the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, they could buy enough time to consolidate their territorial gains in Asia and the Pacific before the United States could retaliate. This would also allow Japan to secure its empire's resource-rich regions, making it nearly impossible for the U.S. to intervene. The Japanese military devised a bold and audacious plan codenamed Operation Z to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet in one decisive strike. The operation was meticulously crafted with the primary objective of inflicting maximum damage to the American fleet while avoiding the full wrath of the U.S. military response. The plan involved a surprise aerial assault on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese Imperial Navy, with the goal of disabling or sinking as many battleships as possible and destroying U.S. aircraft stationed on the island. The attack was not just a military strike, it was Japan's attempt to neutralize a powerful adversary and secure its imperial future. The Japanese Navy assembled a formidable task force for Operation Z, consisting of 6 aircraft carriers, Akagikaga, Soryu, Hiryu Shokaku, and Zuikaku. These aircraft carriers were considered the backbone of Japan's naval power
capable of launching devastating attacks using long-range bombers and torpedo planes.
The task force also included battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and submarines. This large fleet set sail from the Kuril Islands on November 26, 1941, under strict radio silence to maintain complete secrecy. The Japanese had learned from previous naval engagements the importance of surprise, and this was to be their primary advantage. Yamamoto, the architect of the attack, knew that success would hinge on the element of surprise. The attack on Pearl Harbor had to be quick, devastating, and unexpected. The Japanese focus on the U.S. battleships was deliberate. These ships were the backbone of the American naval presence in the Pacific, and crippling them would severely hinder the U.S. Navy's ability to respond. Among the primary targets were the USS Arizona, USS California, and USS Oklahoma, three of the largest and most powerful ships in the U.S. fleet. But the Japanese also targeted the U.S. Air Force on Oahu, including the airfields and hangars, to prevent American planes from responding effectively. The morning of December 7, 1941 began quietly at Pearl Harbor, with most personnel expecting a routine day. The base, located on the island of Oahu, Hawaii, housed the U.S. Pacific Fleet, a symbol of American naval power in the Pacific. At precisely 7:48 a.m. Hawaiian time, the tranquility was shattered. The first wave of Japanese aircraft composed of bombers, torpedo planes, and fighters descended from the sky in a meticulously planned attack. The Japanese had sailed across the Pacific in complete radio silence, ensuring complete surprise. The attack was swift and devastating. The USS Arizona was hit by a bomb that ignited a catastrophic explosion, causing the ship to sink almost immediately, killing over 100 sailors. The USS Oklahoma capsized after being struck by multiple torpedoes. Meanwhile, Japanese bombers destroyed or damaged nearly 200 U.S. aircraft and several battleships, including the USS California, the USS West Virginia, and the USS Tennessee. The attack lasted less than 2 hours, but by the time it ended, 403 Americans were dead and over 1,000 were wounded. In total, 188 aircraft were destroyed and 8 battleships were damaged or sunk. Despite this catastrophic loss, the Japanese made 2 critical oversights. They failed to destroy American aircraft carriers, which were not at Pearl Harbor at the time, and they left the vital repair facilities and fuel storage tanks untouched. These oversights would allow the United States to recover more quickly than Japan had anticipated. In the aftermath of the attack, the United States was plunged into shock and disbelief. The unprovoked assault galvanized the nation, and the American public rallied behind a call to arms. On December 8, 1941, just one day after the attack, President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered his famous Day of Infamy speech declaring war on Japan. Roosevelt's speech stirred the hearts of the American people and marked the country's official entry into World War II. Congress overwhelmingly passed the declaration of war with only one dissenting vote from Representative Jeannette Rankin. The attack on Pearl Harbor had a profound impact on U.S. defense policy and military strategy. The focus immediately shifted to rebuilding the fleet and strengthening U.S. military presence in the Pacific. The aircraft carriers, which had been absent during the attack, became central to U.S. naval strategy. Additionally, the military prioritized the development of air and naval capabilities, including strengthening radar systems to ensure better preparedness in future conflicts. The attack on Pearl Harbor irrevocably altered the course of U.S. history. It pushed the United States from isolationism to full-scale involvement in World War II. The declaration of war on Japan immediately united the American public, leading to a surge in enlistments and support for the military effort. The shift to wartime production was rapid, bringing an end to the Great Depression. Factories that had previously produced civilian goods pivoted to manufacturing war materials such as tanks, planes, and ships. This industrial boom created millions of jobs and drastically lowered unemployment. One of the most significant social changes was the increased involvement of women in the workforce. As men enlisted and left for war, women filled critical roles in factories and shipyards, producing the materials necessary for the war effort. The iconic figure of Rosie the Riveter emerged as a symbol of female empowerment and the crucial contributions of women to the nation's military-industrial efforts. This shift in gender roles had lasting implications, proving that women could contribute to the economy in ways previously considered impossible. The U.S. military response was swift and decisive. The Navy began repairing and replacing the damaged battleships and defense systems in Hawaii, and the Pacific were strengthened. Additionally, the U.S. re-evaluated its defense strategies, learning from the Pearl Harbor attack. The vulnerabilities in naval bases and the importance of air superiority and carrier-based aircraft were emphasized in subsequent military strategies. This change in focus would play a pivotal role in the U.S. military's success in future Pacific battles, including the Battle of Midway. However, the aftermath of Pearl Harbor also brought difficult consequences. Anti-Japanese sentiment surged across the nation, leading to the forced internment of over 120,000 Japanese Americans, many of whom were U.S. citizens. This remains one of the darkest chapters of the war, a stark reminder of how wartime hysteria can lead to grave injustices and the erosion of civil liberties. The internment of Japanese Americans, despite being justified as a security measure at the time, was a violation of constitutional rights and a tragic blemish on U.S. history. The attack on Pearl Harbor also exposed significant intelligence failures. Despite multiple warnings from cryptanalysts and intercepted messages suggesting growing Japanese aggression, the U.S. failed to anticipate the attack. These oversights in intelligence gathering and analysis would be addressed in subsequent years, leading to improvements in military communication radar systems and code-breaking capabilities that played crucial roles in the Allied victory in the Pacific. In conclusion, the attack on Pearl Harbor was not just a military strike. It was a catalyst for profound changes in U.S. foreign policy, military strategy, and national unity. The events of December 7, 1941, pushed the United States into the global conflict, shifting the nation's stance from isolationism to active involvement in World War II. The subsequent military mobilization, social shifts, and economic transformation set the stage for the U.S. to emerge as a global superpower. Despite the horrific loss of life and the initial setbacks, Pearl Harbor marked the beginning of America's pivotal role in defeating the Axis powers and shaping the post-war world order. The aftermath of the attack on Pearl Harbor saw profound changes in both U.S. domestic and foreign policy, marking the end of an era of American isolationism and the beginning of full-scale involvement in World War II. The attack pushed the United States into action, transforming the nation's stance from a defensive posture to one of global military engagement. As the shockwaves from the attack reverberated across the country, the United States found itself fully mobilized for war. In the immediate aftermath, the U.S. military began to rapidly rebuild its naval and air forces, working tirelessly to repair the damaged battleships and replace lost aircraft. Despite the heavy losses, the United States had one advantage: the resilience of its military and industrial capabilities. The focus quickly shifted to improving defenses in the Pacific and preparing for future confrontations. The aircraft carriers, which had been notably absent during the attack, emerged as the centerpiece of the U.S. Navy's strategy in the Pacific. The attack on Pearl Harbor had demonstrated the vulnerabilities of traditional naval power, emphasizing the importance of mobile air forces and the role of aircraft carriers in future naval battles. Domestically, the country shifted from a peacetime economy to one focused on wartime production. Factories, which had previously been producing civilian goods, were now dedicated to manufacturing weapons, vehicles, ships, and aircraft. The industrial boom associated with the war effort had a transformative effect on the U.S. economy, bringing an end to the lingering effects of the Great Depression. Unemployment plummeted as millions of jobs were created to support the war effort, and the country's economy experienced a dramatic recovery. The shift in the workforce also had profound social implications, as men enlisted in the military and went off to fight. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. The iconic image of Rosie the Riveter, symbolizing women who worked in factories, became a powerful cultural image of female empowerment. Women took on roles in factories, shipyards, and other critical areas, filling positions that had traditionally been held by men. This shift in gender roles was not just a wartime necessity, but also a long-term transformation that would have lasting effects on American society as women proved their capability and earned a place in previously male-dominated industries. The attack on Pearl Harbor also galvanized the American public, creating a surge of patriotism and unity across the country. The idea of retribution for the attack, along with the desire to defend the nation, spurred a wave of enlistments in the military. Citizens, both men and women, eagerly volunteered for military service, eager to contribute to the war effort and avenge the losses of Pearl Harbor. This collective spirit of unity brought together individuals from all walks of life as Americans, regardless of background, rallied to support the war effort. Despite the immediate rallying of the nation, the attack also brought significant challenges and moral dilemmas. One of the most disturbing consequences of the attack was the rise in anti-Japanese sentiment across the United States. This heightened suspicion and fear of Japanese Americans, many of whom had been living peacefully in the U.S. for decades. In the wake of the attack, over 120,000 Japanese Americans, including U.S. citizens, were forcibly relocated from their homes on the West Coast and placed in internment camps. They were held under suspicion without any evidence of wrongdoing, a stark violation of their civil rights. This chapter of U.S. history serves as a powerful reminder of how wartime hysteria can lead to unjust actions and the erosion of basic freedoms. While the internment of Japanese Americans is one of the darkest aspects of the war's aftermath, it also spurred important reflections on civil liberties in the U.S. post-war. The internment is now widely regarded as an injustice, a reflection of how fear and racial prejudice can cloud rational judgment. The legacy of this chapter has influenced U.S. policy on civil rights and has served as a cautionary tale about the dangers of wartime measures that infringe on personal freedoms. Despite these dark moments, the attack on Pearl Harbor also laid the foundation for significant positive changes. The United States, galvanized by the attack and unified under the banner of war, was able to rapidly adjust its military and industrial strategies. The attack exposed critical vulnerabilities in the U.S. defense system, prompting immediate improvements in intelligence-gathering radar technology and early warning systems. The United States military's ability to adapt and recover quickly allowed it to regain its strength and play a pivotal role in defeating the Axis powers. As the war progressed, the U.S. would go on to become a key player in the Allied forces' eventual victory over the Axis, proving that the shock of Pearl Harbor could not defeat the resilience and determination of the American people. The attack also marked a dramatic shift in the global balance of power. With the defeat of the Axis powers, the United States emerged as a dominant global superpower, and the war set the stage for the post-war order that would define international relations for decades to come. The attack on Pearl Harbor, while a catastrophic event, ultimately served to unite the United States and forge a path toward global leadership. The resilience, determination, and unity demonstrated by the American people during and after the attack became a defining feature of U.S. history. The lessons learned from Pearl Harbor, both the successes and failures, would shape the direction of the United States in the years following World War II, establishing it as a powerful and influential force on the world stage.